Welcome back to Old War Stories with Uncle Jay. This one is simply entitled The Temple. And yes, it's said with that accent. I'm the Jew boy, you know that. Alright? So I had to go to temple when I was a kid. Or synagogue, if you're in a ritzier area. Anyway, there were some comical things that happened along the way. No, number of different things. But this might be a long story. I don't know yet. Might split it into two parts. Don't know yet. We're going to find out as I start telling the story. I first actually went there when I was 3 years old for nursery school. They had it in the temple. Where else? And when I was 3 years old, I was upstairs in, they had like a big room, and that was the room where we had it. Was it every day? For how many hours? I don't remember. I was 3 years old. Okay, that would have put this about 1982. So, anyway, we were in this room. A couple things about it. There was a fridge in there. There was a sink in there, kind of like a little kitchenette thing. There was a bathroom which just had a toilet and maybe a sink, can't remember, but the pipes were run along the wall exposed. I seem to remember that, and it was painted blue. Anyway, that was all there, and I don't remember exactly what we did, so I could just kind of tell you a couple of things that I do remember. One is that the lights, they had fluorescent lights. There were maybe a dozen of them heading on down to the other end of the room on that side, and a dozen of them heading out on that side. Okay, and there were two light switches. You would think that you'd turn one on and one side gets lit up, turn the other one on, the other side gets lit up, but it didn't work that way. For some reason I cannot fathom, the lights were wired alternately. In other words, this one on, the other side off, but the next one on, this one off, the next one on. So it was like almost like a zigzag you could create between them. And it was a really cool effect if you toggled the light switches, because they would kind of alternate like that. Why and how it was wired that way, I don't know. It seems to me that would be incredibly wasteful as far as wire is concerned. Chances are very good it's still that way today. Unless they replace those lights. I couldn't see them doing that. They never put any money into the place. What else with nursery school? Yes. Spin art. Does anybody know what spin art is? It's a wooden box. It's got a hole in it. And then there's sort of a frame of sorts. Can't really explain it. You put a piece of, not paper, but cardstock, thicker stuff. Almost like an artist's canvas, but this was Jewish, so it was way too cheap for that. So anyway, you put it in there, and this frame is attached to a motor that spins this thing at very, very high velocity. And then they put like poster paint or something in squirt bottles, and you would, squirt it down on there, and as it would spin, it would sling inside the box, so you wouldn't get hit that much with it. And but it would land on the paper, and it would make really cool designs. My father told me something about, I don't know if he made it for them or something, but some shit about an old can opener motor is what drove this thing. But I seem to remember there were a couple of them in there, but I'm not exactly certain. So maybe one failed and he offered to fix it and had a old can opener motor. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea, but I remember doing that. Where the art is, it's long gone. Years later, I actually created something like that, believe it or not, out of an old 8-track player. It had a big metal flywheel, and that metal flywheel was just about, just the tiniest bit smaller than a regular square piece of post-it note paper. So I created that by taking the case off the machine, turning it upside down, 120 volts all around, perfectly fucking safe. And my sister and I would play with that, and we didn't have paint, but we had old nail polish that my mother no longer wanted or used or thought it was no good or I don't know what. And we would make little post-it note ones. Could also do that with crayons and Cray-Pas. All three of those were a lot less messy than paint, but it of course was on a much smaller scale. And we made some really pretty cool looking stuff. The flywheel that was there had a groove around the outside, so you could actually stick. I would just use like my thumbnail, and you could slice the paper off the corners of it and make them round. But I think we just left them square, and to secure it to that, we'd take a piece of scotch tape and like put it in a loop and put it underneath and just smack it in the center of it as close as you could, and that was that. So that, one other thing about when I was 3 years old in nursery school, there were 2 or maybe 3 people, 3, let's go with 3, Anne, Susan, and Eleanor, maybe? Anne and Susan might have been sisters, can't remember. Anne was such a sweetheart. I have no idea how old she was. I'm sure she was pretty young. 20-something is my guess. But she was a grown-up to us because we're 3 years old. And she was just so kind, so nice. I liked her so much. And she had a portable record player. It was yellow. And you'd take it with you. You'd have to plug it in. And one day it stopped working or something. And I said, can I have it? Because she was going to throw it out. And, well, we have to ask your parents or something like that. And then they agreed that I could take it home. And I don't think I still have it, but I never did anything. I just kind of played with it is all it was. And it was fun in that regard. That's all I remember about 3 years old. 4 years old, in a different room, in the basement of the temple. And that was interesting because you could never really, they never had stuff down there. They did later on, but they tended to use, they had 2 big rooms in there, down there. But they tended to only use one of them and not really the other. It sat mostly unused, but I was in that other room a couple of times going forward over the years. Downstairs was cool. It had a water fountain. The main floor had a water fountain also, but I think they changed it at some point to one of those stainless steel LK brand ones that are like on the wall. But these had the old school ones in the upstairs and the basement. And the basement one had been there fucking forever. And it was just awesome. And I remember the thing, it had the button that you press to make the water go. And the button was like gritty. Like, I don't know if it was all scratched up and beat to hell, or if that's just how it was. I think it was just beat to hell for some reason. I don't know. But I remember it was like gritty. It was a good fit. You got like a good grip on it. So I kind of liked that about it. Downstairs, there were windows, but they were like typical basement windows where up there. So there was that. I don't remember too much about 4-year-old nursery school, there were just a couple of things. There was an electric clock that plugged in on the wall, and it had a sweep second hand that would go around. And that was cool because I'd never seen that before by that point, much, really. The rest I had seen with second hands would tick, 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 like that. But that had a sweep second hand. We had Play-Doh, but this was Jewish Play-Doh. It wasn't the real Play-Doh. Basically, it was flour, water, and salt. And they would make this periodically, maybe once a week or something, and then it got like all shitty and whatever, and they threw it out. I don't know, but much cheaper than the actual Play-Doh brand. Now, if you remember Play-Doh, that has a very distinct smell, and if you played with it as a kid, then if you go out and treat yourself and buy Play-Doh today, it smells the same, and it will take you back, and you're going to be like, oh my god, I haven't smelled that in however many decades. So that's pretty cool right there. But this was, they made their own, oh, and of course food coloring to make it different colors. They'd keep it in the fridge when not being used, so it was always cold, and I didn't like that. I think there was wood paneling in that room, and there also was a little kitchenette off to one side there with a fridge and a sink and a couple of cabinets and that. I never actually went in there, but you can kind of see in there a bit. So that's kind of all I remember with that. One time, one of the kids who was in nursery school with me, their father opened up an ice cream shop at the shopping center across the street. And they took all of us, the guy said, I'm going to give all the kids ice cream. And they took all of us across the street, which was a busy road, but, they took all of us, and they were real careful about it. And I remember we had ice cream, and that was that. And I also remember one other time, maybe it was a kid's birthday or something, and we had a Carvel ice cream cake. For those of you not in the Northeast, Carvel is our local soft serve ice cream shop. There's quite a number of them. Definitely here in New York, but also throughout other neighboring states there are a few. Other areas have their own variants, but Carvel was always the shit. I remember the commercials for Carvel. Tom Carvel was the guy who created the company, and he had this way about him. He sort of was the announcer in the commercial, and they showed the various things they sold and stuff. And it was really kind of a New York only type commercial, so that was kind of interesting. But I remember they were on the air all the time when I was a kid, and he had a very interesting way of speaking. But the Carvel ice cream cakes, now we've had ice cream cake before, we know what this is, but Carvel has these chocolate crunchies. I'd like to say I don't know how to better explain it, but they're these crunchy chocolate things. Carvel calls them crunchies because there's no other way to describe them. For some reason, these crunchies are absolutely out of this fucking world delicious. And they put it like on the sides of the cake and shit, and that was like the best part of it. Oh my god, I remember sitting there eating that, and tuna fish with chunks of celery and onion in it. I don't know where it was from. That was also delicious, and I make it that way to this day. But yeah, the crunchies, they now actually have come out with vanilla and strawberry crunchies, and I'm like, no way. No. It has to be the chocolate crunchies, and I'm not a chocoholic by any means. I don't care for it much, but those are absolutely fucking delicious. So there's that, and you can actually go to Carvel and say, can I buy a tub of crunchies? Why, certainly. What flavor would you like? And you can just buy them right there off the shelf, which is like awesome. Well, you got to ask for it, but it's right there. So there was that, and I remember eating that there. The other room that wasn't often used was painted green and was set up with a bunch of tables and shit like that. The room that I was in for nursery school, in the 4-year-old nursery school, was set up for Purim, which is the Jewish holiday where you dress in a costume. It's like Jewish Halloween, and you play games and things, and it's actually a party for the adults because they all get fucking drunk off their ass because that's what the Bible tells them to do. So I'm all for that. But I was a kid, so the kids don't drink yet, and you get it later in life. But we had fun with the games and shit like that. But that was later stuff there. The other green room that was down there when I think I told the old war story of B'nai B'rith. If I didn't, there won't be a link to it. If I did, there's a link to it. But anyway, I remember one time we had to use that room because something was being used in the other. They were having something else in the other room. So I got to go in that other green room once later on. So I remember that. The main floor, the 3-year-old nursery school room, was where they would have Kiddush set up every Saturday on Shabbos. And they put out your challah and your gefilte fish. There were chickpeas and a couple other things, and little plastic goblets this big, of wine. Of course, the rabbi got a real glass of wine, and the other people up, important people got a real glass of wine. It's all part of the job, I guess. So, anyway, that was that. When I later was out of nursery school, I went to public school and kindergarten and, all that stuff. And then sometime, like, by first grade, they said, okay, you're going to Hebrew school. We didn't learn a shit's worth of anything. I learned to read Hebrew, could speak a word or two, shalom. That's about it. But, so there was that. We learned about the culture and the history and the holidays and all shit like that. And I'll spare all the gory details, but I remember a lot of kids in public school said, oh, do you have Hebrew school? No, I'm Christian. Okay, well, do you have anything like that or whatever? Yeah, it's called religion, and we have it on Sunday. Fitting. Okay. Well, tell me about it. Like, how long is it? Oh, man. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, God, it's so boring and this and that. And we're kids, I get that. It's so boring. Well, how long is it? Oh, man, it's an hour, and I can't wait to get out of there. I had Hebrew school 3 times a week, 2 hours Tuesday, 2 hours Thursday, 3 hours on Sunday. In addition to regular school. And they'd give us homework, too. Twice the homework. It was awful. I didn't like going to Hebrew school. It was forced upon my sister and I by, I'm going to stress my mother, but probably my parents. And they gussied up the whole thing. And they said, oh, yeah, you'll go until you graduate. from Hebrew school, and then you'll go on to a yeshiva, and you live on with all of the Judaism in the whole thing. And I'm like, I don't fucking think so. No fucking way. But the Hebrew school was held upstairs. Upstairs, they had a similarly vintage water fountain, like in the basement. Oh, God. Couple things. They would give us a break. You could go get water from the water fountain or go to the bathrooms up there. And they had a men's and a ladies' room and that. So obviously I'm in the men's room. And I'm there, and I was... Did I take a piss or something? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But I was kind of done. But there were kids in a higher grade of Hebrew school, and they were fucking around in there. I just remember this one thing about this one kid. He went in the stall and closed the door, locked the door, and then he stood up on the toilet, so now he could look over the top of the stall or something. And I don't know if he had somebody else in there, but somebody said something like, "I'm going to flush you down the toilet." And they push the flush lever, and it's not like a house toilet. It's like a commercial, one of those type toilets. So you flush that, so you get that loud flush sound, and he just like fucking put his arms up, and went, and ducked down and shit, and that. And it was just, it was hilarious to see that once, I remember. There were chalkboards in Hebrew school, as you might expect. These boards were not cleaned ever. Throughout, now they don't use chalkboards that much anymore that I know of, because they got dry erase boards and smart boards and shit like it. Was chalk when I was a kid. So they had that, and they were, because you use the eraser and it would get rid of what you wrote, but it would be cloudy or dusty in that area. The whole thing was just caked in that, and it was like I choked looking at it, because it just looked dusty, like it was terrible. Mrs. Sprung was one of the teachers. She had a first name, started with an A. Autumn Sprung, I think, was her name. Maybe? I can't remember now. She was very nice. She was very nice. But that room had, the walls up there were made out of cinder blocks. And it was painted and that. But it was made out of cinder blocks for whatever reason. There were 6 rooms. Oh, and an office. There was an office there with they had a rotary phone still. A black rotary phone. Like one time I said to the teacher I was not feeling good, and I went in there and the teacher said, "What's your number?" and called up, and I think it was busy or something, so I was just stuck there. Fucking wonderful. But I remember that. So anyway, there was that. But in Mrs. Sprung's room, maybe her name was Arlene. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there was this alcove. I can't explain it. It's like the cinder blocks were not formed properly. And there was an opening like this wide in the wall. And we were skinny kids, so you could actually slither in there. And I remember I did that. But it was a tight fit for me even then, and I was skinny as a fucking rail. And there was this little room, probably no bigger than this chair that I'm sitting in. And no idea what it was for, and there was nothing in there. So that was great. Trying to remember, there was, waiting to go into Hebrew school was fun. They had a bell that would ring like an alarm bell that would go ring, almost like a telephone type ring, old gong ringer, but it was a real bell like that. And there was that. We would wait in the hallway downstairs before they would ring the bell for us to come up and go upstairs and go to our respective rooms and that. So you would get there a little early and you would wait and whatever. So I remember that, but then later on they didn't want us hanging out in the hallway down there. I don't know why. So instead, they had us wait upstairs in the lounge. The lounge was a swanky room on the other side of the hall, next to the office. It was a big room, and it had carpeting that had to be from the 1960s. The furniture and everything that was up there were any of the Jews' old couches and coffee tables. Oh, we're getting new furniture. Let me see if the temple wants this old stuff. And they would take it. And up there they had a TV for us to watch. We had over-the-air antennas still. And the kids would watch like Tiny Toon Adventures back in the day. That's all I remember ever being on, because that's what they watched, and I was not into that show. There was a stereo that was a console stereo. It was like a wooden piece of furniture with this receiver, no idea what brand, and the power button was purple clear plastic, and it would light up when you pressed it in. It was 1970s, pretty sure. And the speakers were there, and I remember Pump Up the Jam by Technotronic came on the radio once. That was fun. We had a lot of fun in there. And then they decided to give the cantor an office. The cantor is the guy who sings Jewish songs in Hebrew. And he's there on every Sabbath and that, and teaches the kids for their bar and bat mitzvahs as time goes on, stuff like that. So he was also an important figurehead, if you will, there. And they gave him this office, but it was put up shoddily and cheaply. They got these metal walls that bolted together. It had windows, but the windows were plexiglass, and they were like a mottled finish, so you can't see in there. And the door had a regular doorknob, except for the fact that there was this plug on the outside, which happened to be where the latch was. So for fun, we'd pull the plug out and push the latch on the door, and then you could open the door to the cantor's office. We didn't go in there or steal anything or anything like that, but I just remember that. So there was that. And then in the later years, the ceilings were this almost like, I want to call it a popcorn ceiling, but it's not. It looked more like when you go into a big box store, whether it's a home improvement store or Walmart or Target. Well, Target probably not, but they have like, it's just kind of an open ceiling, and they have this like spray foam looking stuff all over everything up there, except this was flat. Okay, it was not just open like that where you see all the pipes and ducts and stuff. It was flat, but it was made out of this stuff like that, and because it had been there for so long, every now and again you just hear thud somewhere in the room, and a piece of the ceiling would fall, and it was very dusty stuff. So there was this conspiracy that it was asbestos. I am certain that this was asbestos. This started falling more and more as time went on over the years, and it got to the point where people were getting very concerned, and they went to the rabbi and they said, "We're not going to come here. You got to fix the ceiling This is asbestos. And the rabbi said, well, we'll look into it. We'll have to get some people in. And da. So anyway, they finally got some people in. And I remember one Shabbos, he said, the ceiling, we had people come in. They said it's not asbestos, so nothing to worry about. Sure, it wasn't fucking asbestos. There's no question, no doubt in my mind. So if you're dealing with that place, I got to breathe asbestos over the years. Just about certain on that. There was a time that I was leaving the place. Oh, and back to nursery school, there was a short brick wall, like this tall. And I always said my dad would walk me there. It was only 4 blocks. I want to walk on the wall. So he'd kind of hold my hand and I'd walk on the wall up to the building and that. I just remembered that. So there was that. The one time I was coming out, now in the back of the building was a driveway. It was gravel. Somewhere along that was a manhole cover. Didn't really get to go behind the building much, but I had seen it on a couple of occasions. And I just remember, now I don't know if this was for the sewer pipe or what, but I remember a man standing in this manhole that didn't go that deep. And it looked like he had shit all over him, and he was shoveling stuff out of this pipe. So I don't know if this was just a drainage pipe or it was the actual sewer line, but it didn't smell good, I'll tell you that. You smelled it not even close to it. So I think it was the shitter, but I'm not entirely certain. They also had an area where they had like the small, like the kiddie synagogue. There was some stained glass, fluorescent lights behind it, and there were 2 through the wall, or really through the window, but big 220 volt air conditioners that went through that. Oftentimes they would only have one on, but sometimes they'd put the other one on. They had this yellow carpeting that had to be from the 70s, but it was not a shag rug. It was a short pile carpet, like a Berber type carpet. So that was there, and in there was a huge projection TV. It was huge by those standards back in the day. I don't know what sizes that were common back in the day. This was a front projection. Big wooden cabinet. Screen, like a projector screen, that was curved and stood on top of it and stayed there. And then when you went to use it, it would fold out in the front, and it had a red, green, and blue projector light thing, and it would make an image on it. Somebody donated it to the temple. That TV never worked. Over the years, they would try it again and again, and the picture was all wrong or off or something, and then they finally got somebody who knew how to fix the thing, and they finally fixed it, and I remember seeing a video on it once, and I don't even remember what it was. Jumping around again because it's all kind of a blur. I'm trying to put this all in. I think we're way over time for a war story, but we're just going with it. There was in the last grade, and it went with the Hebrew letters, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, Vav. A, B, C, D, E, F, G kind of thing. So those were the different grades that you were in. Instead of first, second, third grade, they used the letters to denote numbers. Strange. Anyway, so there was that. But for some reason, when I was in Vav, the last one, we did not have a room available for us. Maybe they took one of those rooms upstairs and repurposed it. And they didn't have a teacher either. So the teacher was the rabbi. And we got to hang out in the rabbi's office. He had leather couches and nice carpeting. He had this big tropical looking indoor plant. Couple of other things. We got to relax. You could lay down on the floor, you could lounge on the couch, you could, whatever worked. And there were a couple of chairs around that were really nice and cushy chairs and that. And toward the back of it is where his desk was and that. But they took us on a trip, and somewhere, I have a picture of that, they took us into New York City they got a bus, like a school bus, to drive us into New York City, and they took us to this Jewish museum. I don't know where it was. And there's a picture of me with some other of my high school, Hebrew school, kids in my Hebrew school class, standing maybe in front of the place. And I know the cantor was in the picture in New York City. I found that picture. I don't know where we're standing, but it's somewhere in New York City in 1991. Going from left to right is the cantor. His name was Todd Rosner. Next to him is Linda Hakeem, Daniel Smith, Talia Cohen, Marissa Goldberg, Jonathan Landis. I cannot remember that other girl's name. And there I am next to her, and then the rabbi, whose name was Eric M. Lankin. That was a fun trip. I don't remember anything about it except that picture. So that was good. I've told other Hebrew school stories over the years. There was another one. Oh, I Don't Care About That. Was that the name of it? I'll see if I remember that. God only knows. I think I told that one. So that was the asbestos, cleaning out the sewer pipe. And there was the main synagogue, which was nothing fancy. I think they did have neon flicker flame bulbs in a lot of things. So I seem to remember that. And behind that was the I don't know what do you call it, like a venue hall or something. They had their own catering company that they did business with, who owned/maintained this part of the building. I don't know. And they just had a big curtain that they could pull. One of those fan-fold, like, paneling curtains kind of thing. And then they could slide it open, and then you would go in there, so that you could have, like, a room for the synagogue for the Bar Mitzvah, and then outside of that, maybe a cocktail hour kind of thing, and then the main reception in there. And they had a dance floor, and they had a bar. I was in there a couple times. They had a bar or two, and they had this was like, I haven't seen a good bar like this, where they had the fucking soda gun, and they could put, let me get whiskey and Coke. Sure, they put the whiskey, and the Coke comes right out of the gun, shit like that. Like, it was a full, like, a good real bar. It always smelled funny. in there. I don't know what it was. It just always smelled funny in there. Couldn't tell you any more about it. Couple of kids had their bar and bat mitzvahs in there, so I was in there for actual parties as well, once or twice. But for mine and my sister's, we went elsewhere. Mine was at a place called Leonard's of Great Neck, and I think they closed. I'm not sure. So does that make my bar mitzvah invalid? Not sure. Anyway, that was that. I have another thing that I want to tell, but this has gone on so long, so we're going to end this off right here. Wow, there was a lot that I remembered that I didn't even remember that I was going to remember. I had no idea of all that stuff, and it just kept firing in my brain. So anyway, there you go. A whole lowdown on all of that I did for years and dealt with that place. And then finally I was out of that, and Judaism was out of my life. Well, not really, but it was mostly out in terms of I don't have to go to temple no more. I can, but no more. Oh, and you have to be a member of the temple. You can walk in off the street. They'll take you. They'll be happy for that. But if you move to the area and you go there like 2, 3, 4 times and you start talking with people, the rabbi will get word of this and he'll come up to you and say, "Are you a member of the temple? You got to have a membership. You got to pay this much, whatever, this and that, because you're coming here. We have to pay for things." So he had, shit like that, and we were a member for years, and they finally just dropped the membership, and that was it. And my parents haven't been back there either. The place is still there, obviously, but whatever. It was a lot of mishmash, beat up, unkempt type stuff. A building that was not in disrepair, but could have been a lot nicer. That is really all I can remember about the place as of right now. So that's going to do it. Thank you so kindly for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you click like. Make sure you click subscribe. And take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.